What's your process when you get a notification or if you're manually doing updates and something breaks?
So yeah, usually I try to prevent those cases because if there's something sensitive, I try to test it either on local server or staging server.
Sure.
But when that actually happens, the first thing I check is the logs to understand what's going on. And then I try to see if there's some kind of plugin that was the culprit. And if that's the case, then I disable the plugin and try to revert the plugin to the previous version. And if there's something else, we go step by step, looking at the logs, looking at the end result, disabling all minification or caching system that may be active, because that may also be the problem there. Once we figure it out, it's a matter of bringing it up as fast as possible. Of course, sometimes things happen outside of your control. For example, if you have some kind of attack on the website itself, and you do the best you can according to the time you have. But I think all three of us have probably spent some nights awakened dealing with issues we didn't cause.
No, absolutely. I think it's a great point. First of all, of course, avoid this issue from happening. But unfortunately, it's technology, and technology breaks down and we have issues. And so looking through the logs, for the non-technical person, server logs, this is the information that your host is hopefully making easy for you to get access to, whether it's through their dashboard at Kinsta. We have a whole section for logs in the My Kinsta dashboard. You can also SSH in and look up the logs on the command line. Definitely much more advanced there. Hey everyone, it's Roger with Kinsta. I'm joined today by some very special guests from Codeable. I have Elson, Tome, and Edith with me. Hey y'all, how you doing?
Hi there.
Hiya.
Awesome. All right, so for today's topic, we're going to talk about WordPress plugin updates, what to do when they break your site. And just to give the listeners a quick overview of our agenda is we're going to talk about why plugin updates matter, how to do automatic updates, whether you're using WordPress's automatic update or Kinsta has an automatic update tool, troubleshooting a broken site after that plugin update happens. And then with our Codeable experts, we'll really dive into when to hire a developer and, more importantly, how to do it right. So with all that said, we're going to do some quick introductions. My name's Roger. I work in partnerships and community at Kinsta. We're a managed hosting company for WordPress. And I'm just excited to be here to talk with some real experts from Codeable. And so I'm going to look at Edith first. Can you go ahead and give us a quick introduction of who you are?
Hi everyone, I'm Edith. I'm located in Austria. I work at Codeable and I specialize in WooCommerce development.
Excellent. Tome.
Hi, my name is Tome. I am from Skopje, Macedonia. I'm generally a generalist, I would say, my skill set. I love performance, I love optimization, and do everything except being horrible at design.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm with you on the design part. And then we've got Elson. Hey, Elson.
Hello everyone, my name is Elson. I live in Madeira Island in Portugal, and I started out as a front-end developer in Codeable. These days I also do a bit more project management and hope to provide some value here today.
Wonderful. All right. The first kind of part to get into here is why plugin updates matter. And in WordPress, I saw a statistic, I think it was from last year, PatchStat came out, and they identified that 97% of all vulnerabilities for WordPress come through plugins. And so this is a really important topic. Plugins are a really cool part of WordPress. They allow us to extend things, and anybody can create one. So that's the great part of it. The not so great part of it is anybody can create a plugin. And so coding standards can vary, and people need to be really careful. And so as we're kind of diving in here, I'd love to hear kind of, each of your thoughts on why plugin updates matter, both from security, performance, and then common issues that people just need to kind of be aware of. And so, Edith, again, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts about security and performance with plugin updates?
Yeah, so security is obviously the big reason why you want to update plugins. But my clients tend to run shops. So what I really look out for are the performance improvements with each plugin update. And plugins are working really hard, usually in the background, to be faster, to do things better, to have less database queries, less duplication. And if you're not updating your plugins, you're going to be stuck on a performance level from several months or a year ago, whereas your competitors are already using the latest tools. So yeah, if you value performance, if checkout speed matters to you, update your plugins for sure.
Excellent. So that's a great point on performance. Tome, I wonder if you could kind of talk more about the security side of plugin updates.
Yes, but let me start with some kind of connect to what Edith says.
Yeah.
One other thing which I have experience with is sometimes your plugins help you connect with other services. And sometimes those services update. So actually you updating your plugins will make sure that services you're using are actually accessible. Okay. I've had an issue with some UPS connections that were kind of lately changed. So I've had experience with that. In
Great
terms
point.
of security, I would say yes, a lot of plugins can have security issues, but more likely than not, they are often quickly patched. And the whole security process has a period where the researcher informs the plugin author and gives them time to apply the patch. So normally, if you keep your plugins updated, you will pretty much always be secure. Of course, it's always important to look out of security information regarding the plugins you're using, because sometimes your plugins can even be abandoned. So also take care of that, but generally update your plugins.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point is, one issue with WordPress plugin updates is we only have one type of update, right? We don't get security updates versus performance updates, which we get like with WordPress core. And so it's really important to think of all updates to plugins as a security update because you just don't know what exactly is in there. Elson, any thoughts about common concerns about updating plugins and like potentially breaking your website?
Yeah, so the back-end part here is pretty well covered. I can provide my 2 cents on the front-end side. I work a lot with builders, and some people tend to be building a website with a builder that has not been updated in 2 years. If we just consider the security part, there's some probably JavaScript dependencies like libraries that need to be updated every once in a while to make the website more secure and to prevent attacks. But there's also the technical debt, because if you're building hundreds of pages with a builder and then you're doing massive updates every 2 years, the likelihood of you having to rebuild those pages is higher. Therefore, if you do updates more frequently, you tend to avoid those major updates and the issues they cause. One thing I tend to do before updating is to read the changelog to actually understand if there are some major items that we need to take into consideration. And that is just because of things that happen in the past. As we are developers, every once in a while these things happen that when you are updating a project, you tend to run into layout issues after updating.
Absolutely. Excellent. Great insights here. And I think that this segues in perfectly to kind of the next section where we're talking about actually updating these plugins and using different tools. And in some cases, right, so in WordPress, we now have automatic updates is an option. This has been for many years now. And then as of last summer, 2024, in WordPress 6.6 update, we got the auto rollback feature. So if an update causes a PHP error, it now rolls the site back automatically. And then we've got additional tools with visual regression testing, such as Kinsta's automatic update tool. So that's actually taking a screenshot of the site before and after. If there's a difference, it'll do a rollback and let you know so you can work on it. I'd love to kind of hear each of your thoughts on when and if you do use automatic update tools, whether it's WordPress or Kinsta's, when that works well, when it doesn't work well, depending on if you've got an expert professional developer such as yourselves to actually work on the site, or if it's just a solo non-technical person operating their site. What are some of the best practices people should be thinking about with these different tools? And we'll kind of change the direction here a little bit. I'm going to go over to Tome and love to hear your thoughts on how do you approach updating plugins based on different use cases?
So I would start first with the front end generally, because that's the easiest part to test. You can compare the old version and new version, and you can use visual regression testing tools. I sometimes use my native ones, sometimes I use services. But after that, just focus on what's important for your business. Are the users consuming courses, or are they just getting leads and you're generating leads and then you need to focus on the contact form? Or maybe are you more shop focused and you have to test your whole flow, and also make sure that you test any of the features that should be controlled by the plugins that you are updating. Also, I would suggest maybe doing a gradual update to start with, depending on the risk of your website. So how much damage can you do by breaking your site, and then try to work carefully from there.
And I think it's a great point there. Like, what is the most important part of your website, right? So I have a lot of clients I've worked with that it's a lead gen site, right? And so the form is absolutely critical. And so if the form breaks, there's no point in having a website almost. So make sure you're testing that form as soon as you make an update and just make sure it works. And you brought up, gradual updates. Edith, I'd love to hear your thoughts on using staging environments and kind of breaking out the updates. How do you go about making these updates?
So I'm probably not quite doing what Kinsta would do. Is I'm a control freak, so I don't do automated updates. I do them on WordPress core, the minor updates, because I found minor updates WordPress core work very well. But all my clients are basically shops, and the visual regression testing is great. It will tell you if the site is broken, but it doesn't tell me if checkout is working, if payments are working. So I do the updates manually. I do them either weekly or every other week. Every other week tends to be my preferred one. At a quiet time, as early as possible in the morning when there are least customers around. And I like to be online when I do it, and I like to then be online as the orders progress through the day to monitor it. With WooCommerce, I tend to find that you can't break out the updates, because the extensions for WooCommerce rely on WooCommerce. So there's an interaction between the plugins. So if I update all the extensions that rely on WooCommerce, but I don't update WooCommerce, there could be an incompatibility. So for me, unfortunately, it usually means updating everything in one go. And yes, staging is great. I love staging and I love backups. I don't think you can ever have too many backups, especially if you are maintaining the shop yourself. If you take a backup, you have your insurance policy. So if your hosting provider allows you to take backups, just run a new backup before you do the update. And if you have a staging environment, again, test it there first. You may not be able to test everything, but it takes a lot of the risk out of the update process.
Absolutely, and I think that's great insight, right? Is there's different ways of doing this for everybody based on the use case, right? If a customer has the ability to pay for Edith to be manually making these updates, then absolutely, if your website is generating that much revenue, then you should absolutely be taking these additional cautions. And I think one of the great things at Kinsta is, we create that staging environment. We have the automatic backups. We also have manual backups. So, if you're trying to do something right then, you can name it, hey, I'm trying to do this thing, so you can remind yourself what that backup is. And I think that's really great. One question for you, how do you test that the payment aspect of the checkout is still working? Do you just make a purchase and for $1 or something?
Yeah, it depends on the importance of the site. It depends also how many orders are flooding in. By the time I've done the update, there might already be paid orders coming through anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, doing a low value payment, $1 or so, is a great way of doing it.
Okay, excellent. All right. And Elson, what are your thoughts about, utilizing different tools, whether it's, the client's able to hire you to come in and manually do these, or maybe they're a little more budget conscious. How would you advise the more budget conscious user?
So this, again, it depends on the type of project, the amount of traffic it gets, and also the mindset of the client itself. I do have some clients who are more on the lower end that they tend to not have a lot of traffic, and those have an automatic plugin management system and updates and backups all included. And basically there's also an uptime monitor that warns me every day if there's something wrong with the website. And there's some clients that all the updates are disabled, and then I go there once a month and I manually update them. And even in the update process, I tend to start with a backup if I'm doing it live. And then after that, I'll try to update all the plugins that are least likely to break the website, and then after that, then I update the major ones, and then I test the systems as in forms or purchases if it's a store. But again, clients also tend to sometimes not realize if there's something wrong for a couple of days, and when it's been a couple of days with something wrong, if they manage it themselves, they lost money. That if they actually paid an expert to update the website and maintain it properly, that would basically be a lower investment with a great return.
And I think that's a really great point, right? Is, what is the value you're extracting from this website, right? If all of your leads for your business are coming from this website, you should invest, spend a little bit of money making sure that it's updated correctly and that someone's watching it. At Kinsta, we're trying to give people as many tools to help automate this. You mentioned, update checkers and uptime and all of that, and we send out notifications, but if nobody's paying attention to those notifications, they're not doing a lot of good. So I think that there's, you've got to find a good balance of the tools and having the experts there to help you out with it. Tome, I saw you kind of raised your hand there. Did you want to add something?
Generally, I would suggest if you can have a technical person set it up, it would be just really helpful. Set up some kind of automation that will notify anytime your website has a fatal error or some serious error, because normally those are the most damaging ones. If your checkout process fails, then no, you cannot really process payments. Same thing with lead generation. If that fails, there's no way for your user to actually record the leads. So I would always love to be informed sooner rather than later that something is wrong with the website.
No, and you bring up a great point there, right? A very low-tech solution is it's email. You want to make sure that you're, allow listing that email so it's not going to the spam box. And then most importantly, making sure that somebody's actually paying attention so that when those messages come in, they know what to do. Like, they're not only paying attention, but they also have been enabled. Maybe they can log into the hosting account. They can definitely log into the website and they can, work on it in some way. Edith, what did you have to add?
Yeah, just one little trick I find useful is when I'm working on a site, I'm obviously logged in as an admin, but I will always have a separate browser open. So if you normally work in Chrome, have Firefox open and check the site not logged in, because usually sites use a lot of caching. And what you see uncached may look fine, but the cached version may have been broken during the update. The other thing is always clear the caches after updating. But yeah, one thing I learned the hard way is have a second browser open where you're not logged in, because then you're seeing what your customers are seeing.
I think that's great advice. One of the things I tend to do is I'll use my mobile phone kind of in that manner as well. But no, great advice. And I think, so this is a great segue again, right? So we've gone through the plugin update, whether we're doing automatic or we're manually updating. Now, worst case scenario, something actually does break during the plugin update. What's our processes here? We've got a couple of different things to look at, right? Is it the host? Did something happen at the host? Is there a PHP incompatibility possibly happening? What is the next action to take? So, Elson, I'm going to throw it into your court. What's kind of your process when you get a notification or if you're manually doing updates and something breaks? What's kind of your process for handling that?
So yeah, usually I try to prevent those cases because if there's something sensitive, I try to test it either on a local server or staging server.
Sure.
But when that actually happens, the first thing I check is the logs to understand what's going on. And then I try to see if there's some kind of plugin that was the culprit. And if that's the case, then I disable the plugin and try to revert the plugin to the previous version. And if there's something else, we go step by step, looking at the logs, looking at the end result, disabling all minification or caching system that may be active, because that may also be the problem there. Once we figure it out, it's a matter of bringing it up as fast as possible. Of course, sometimes things happen outside of your control. For example, if you have some kind of attack on the website itself, and you do the best you can according to the time you have. But I think all three of us have probably spent some nights awakened dealing with issues we didn't cause.
No, absolutely. I think it's a great point. First of all, of course, avoid this issue from happening. But unfortunately, it's technology, and technology breaks down and we have issues. And so looking through the logs, for the non-technical person, server logs, this is the information that your host is hopefully making easy for you to get access to, whether it's through their dashboard at Kinsta. We have a whole section for logs in the My Kinsta dashboard. You can also SSH in and look up the logs on the command line. Definitely much more advanced there. But Tome, you've got your hands up. You're chomping at the bit to answer on this one. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on your process.
Generally, first, always have staging. Don't update production if you can do it. Generally, 99% of the time, just go for staging. Then update and check if something is broken. If it is, go to staging, revert back the previous version, and then start updating one by one. I'm starting as a non-technical person, not as a developer. Always read the logs first. If you can know how to read them and understand them, because that's also important. Once you do that, you can figure out what's the conflict. Most of the time, there's something that can be done. That's something in your team that's maybe outdated or non-supported anymore. But yes, take it slow. Don't panic. Start on staging so you don't have to panic, and then move forward slowly.
Absolutely. And if you've got that backup, use that backup, restore the backup, and then maybe try and figure out the troubleshooting of things.
Always.
Edith, I want to jump into hiring developers and getting into that, but before we get there, I'd love to also hear your take on, goodness, this white screen of death, or, something's come up, the inline has broken, or worst case scenario, the checkout has broken. I'd love to hear kind of your troubleshooting process when you're seeing a problem at checkout.
Yeah, I think what Tome said is very important. Don't panic. Work the problem. It's like what the astronauts do. Work the problem, because panic doesn't help you. If it's really a white screen, the white screen of death, then rolling back would be an obvious choice. If it's something different, then yes, you gotta look at the error logs. I know it's difficult for somebody who isn't technical, but the thing is, unless you actually know what's causing the problem, you're not going to be able to fix it. And it often isn't actually, you might think, oh, it's that plugin, but you don't know. You really need the actual information. So from my point of view, I start looking at error logs. That's enable all the logging, look at all the logging, track down where the error occurs. If you're not that technical, you're sort of stuck, then I would also say contact your hosting provider. Hopefully your hosting provider will be online to help you. I mean, I know it's not their job to fix coding issues on your site, but if they can give you a bit of help with a log entry, they usually will. So get help. So look at everything, fire off a quick message to your host, and then continue to work the problem.
Great advice here. And I love the don't panic. You bring up a great point here is, all WordPress sites have to be hosted somewhere. And so you should have a host that's at least willing to talk to you and give you some support and help you maybe at least identify, hey, I have an issue. What's this issue? And then hopefully you have a host that's giving backups so they can just help you restore the backup. And in the meantime, they can give you the logs, they can give you the errors. You should go to a developer and, whether you have a developer or find a developer who's going to help you figure that out. And so we've arrived perfectly to our last section here on when to hire a developer and how to do it right. And so, Edith, I'm going to come back to you and kind of talk into this issue, right? So we've identified there's been an issue. Our host has miraculously been able to restore the site. They've helped us identify maybe some log issues. But I've never hired a developer before. The internet is a big, scary place. What's like the first steps I should be taking when considering hiring a WordPress developer to help with a plugin issue?
Yeah, so you really need somebody you can trust, because the reality is you won't be able to verify what they're doing on your site. You just won't be able to. I mean, once a developer has access to your site, they need to be absolutely 100% trustworthy, especially if you're running a shop, especially if you have payment systems, you have customer data. So, yeah, I mean, a place like Codeable really is a great help then, because we are vetted. You've got Codeable in the background, as a security as well, to make sure that the people you are hiring are of the standard you need and that you can trust them, and that you don't have to have a bad feeling about hiring them. If you prefer to go directly, then go by personal recommendation. But don't hire just somebody off the internet because they're cheap and they say they can do it within the next 5 minutes. That's the way to disaster.
And you bring up a great point here. Definitely a great point about Codeable. This is why we're partnered with Codeable, is they've vetted all of the experts. You're all WordPress experts. You've been vetted through various questionnaires, and then also as you're doing projects through Codeable, those are getting reviewed and constant quality assurance is happening. But you brought up a really great point about giving somebody access to your site. And so there's two things to make sure people are thinking about there. Is the first one is access to your hosting account. And you definitely want to be careful about this. If you only have one user on your hosting account and that's what you have to share with a third-party developer, you might want to consider having a different host, because you do not want to give up the keys to the kingdom like that, because now that person can do really whatever they want to do with your website. And so at a host like Kinsta, we've got multiple user roles. We've got company level roles, which means they can access every site on your account. We've got admin, developer, but then we also have site level roles. So you're only giving somebody access to a specific site. And to me, that is really the best avenue to start with, is really giving somebody as little access as possible so they can do the work. And we even go further and we have a site developer access, which only gives you access to the staging site of your site. And so if they mess something up or they end up being not trustable and they do something, not good, it's only to your staging environment and you can just destroy that. So, kind of moving further into the conversation, and the next thing is user roles. And so, Tome, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts about, access to the developer and then how to talk to the developer in terms of scope. As a developer, what do you want to hear from a client or a potential client about the issue, and what's the most helpful information they can be sharing in this situation?
Actually, I want to go back to something you said. If you can only give your developer your only hosting user and password, don't. Because if you cannot afford website to be down, you cannot afford for an hour, you cannot afford the website to be down for 5 days until you get your account back. So
sure,
that's to start with.
Great point.
But generally, when I work with a developer, I want to know, first of all, how big is your website and how much traffic does it take? It's not because if I can charge you more or less, it's actually just to see how urgent and how important it is. Because dealing with a website that has 1 lead per day or 1 lead per week, comparing to a website that has 100 orders per minute in some cases, it means that there's a different level of risk, and the approach that you do matters. Second, I would suggest always use secure passwords when you're giving your developer access. We can use the WordPress default ones. Those are quite actually secure. Make sure you also use that for yourself. It's a really interesting question. Which role do you give the developer? It all depends on the problem that you are solving. In terms of what I want to know from a client, first, as I said, the amount of traffic that I'm getting and how important is the website. Number 2 is how is it updated often and which version are we working with? Is it on the latest up-to-date PHP version, or is something that's really old that I'll have to spend a lot more time working with? Timeline is really important. Backups are really important. Version control if you're using yours, or do I have to set up my own just to make sure that everything is set correctly? And yeah, that's where the conversation starts. Then after that, everything is on case by case basis, I would say.
Okay, absolutely. So Elson, kind of getting into here, we've got, on Codeable, people can fill out a form and they can put a whole bunch of information in there. Hopefully they're giving us at least, the PHP information, the WordPress version, and it's not just a my site's broken help, right? When people are trying to share information, what is like an example of too little information? For instance, site's broken help. But then on the other end, what is too much information? When are they just giving you way too much and it's not as helpful?
That's an interesting point of view. If I can point out the best way to provide context is to actually provide a screen recording of what's happening, because as a front-end developer, I see mostly layout issues, right? So if they display me the layout issue as it is displaying in their device, and they somehow can point to a design of how it should be originally, then I can compare and provide feedback regarding that. Or actually, sometimes people experience the issues in a specific set of circumstances, and they're not able to provide details onto how to cause it. So a video recording is quite good. If you can't do a video recording, some screenshots and some text describing it. But in terms of over information, just don't dump 100 logs and the original zip files for the plugins and themes plus backups from last year, because so much information is also an issue in these cases.
No, it's a great point on, kind of, gradually working into here. But I think, a picture speaks 1,000 words and video speaks 1,000,000,000 words, right? The more people can share screenshots and I feel that for the most part, people are getting better about this in some ways, but it still is shocking to me how much people don't know that there is the ability to take at least a screenshot and even annotate it, like drawing a circle and saying, hey, this is the problem. These are just really simple things. Don't discount a screenshot. And of course, if you can send a video, that's even better. Edith, yeah, you've got your hand up. What do you have to add?
Just to say, if your problem is WooCommerce related, there's also a great thing you can send over, and that's under WooCommerce status, you can download a system report, which is safe to share. It's the first thing WooCommerce support will also ask you if you contact them. But that system report tells me your PHP version, your MariaDB version. It tells me the plugins you have active and not active, the versions. So it doesn't give me any personal information, but it gives me a lot of information about your shop. And that is a great thing to share. So if WooCommerce is something you're using, if you include that information, that will get me a long way to understand how your shop is built. And the other thing is, if you see an error message coming up on the screen, at that moment, take a screenshot. Screenshots of error messages are so worthy because they tell us what's going on.
Yeah, and another great point here is you don't have to be an expert, right? Take the screenshot, send the screenshot, and then the expert can determine what is happening from that. And I think, the information that WooCommerce gives you about the system setup from, the host to how WordPress is configured, these are vital pieces of information to be sharing with a developer that you're working with. So, we're talking a little bit in cases of extreme situations where something has just literally broken and you have a kind of an emergency situation. But kind of pulling back a second and looking, larger picture, we've got things with overall site performance. We have overall security configuration that a developer can come in and help you, at least audit and make suggestions for how to move forward. Tome, kind of going into your realm here a little bit on performance, what do you suggest people, why should they hire a professional to come in and do a performance audit? And what are the things that they should expect from that?
Thank you for the question. When working with a performance audit, I would say there's two things which you should first understand. Every time I do performance audit, I start with that. There are two results. One is what testing tool like PHP Insight will give you, and the second is what your users actually get as a user experience. And all depends on where the users are. Are they worldwide or are they localized somewhere? And then depends your location of your hosting. Maybe they have a better network and you can afford to load more better images, more JavaScript, more CSS, or is their network connection rural, which then will make you a little more budget friendly in terms of performance. So I start with that. Then I try to explain to my clients that based on their current setup, other than starting from scratch and rebuilding the website from zero, there might be some trade-offs here. Maybe this current stack and the way the website is built can get us to a decent level, fast level, but doesn't mean that we can get it up to the best version of the website. We can trick it, like we can trick PHP Insights by delaying all JavaScript until the mouse moves, and then it will get great numbers, but that's irrelevant. That's, for me, is vanity metrics. So I would say all the synthetic tools that you get your URL in and you get a number, which tells you, oh, here you're great, or your website is slow, those are actually diagnostics tools more than anything else. What should you worry about is what your web users are using. And here we can work with the Chrome user experience report a little bit more and tell you, because they gather the data for your users on Chrome browsers and Android devices for now, and you can see what they're actually experiencing. And that's what matters. The only thing that matters is what your users are experiencing, I would say. So I try to explain that first to start with.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, right? There's a core web vital tests and these, 0 to 100 number, and you want to be 100. And so you can do these tricks like you mentioned, right? Until the mouse moves, nothing loads. And that tricks basically the page speed tools into thinking that you have a fast site. But as a user, it's a miserable experience, right? And we see this happen again and again. I'll go to sites where, nothing's loading until I do something on the site, or every time I do something on the site, it keeps jumping around on me as things are slowly loading in. Elson, from a front-end developer perspective, when you're working with a client, let's say maybe they brought you in to fix a problem, and you've done that, and now you're seeing their site and you've got some suggestions for them. How do you generally present those so that the client can see it as, hey, it's not just more work, we're actually trying to go to the next level with your website?
Yeah, so most cases tend to be caused by not the best practices when creating the pages or the content itself. As in original large 20 meg images from the editorial team that an advertiser sent over and they just uploaded it, or they just filled with a bunch of plugin or extensions just to add something to the block editor. So mostly it's about doing an initial analysis, trying to understand what they actually need, what can be removed, then suggesting like a list of plugins to be removed. And sometimes I even provide like a guide with best practices of like recommended image sizes and compression and a guide to how to achieve that. Plus, sometimes they actually hire me to provide some training directly to their teams. This tends to help out in the long term, because sometimes the person who actually hires the developer to fix the issue is not the person who is daily managing the website. It's the telephone game. Whatever information you provided to them, they actually send over reports so that everybody can read, and most people don't read. So it tends to be in terms of how big the pain point is for them, and if it's big enough, they're more likely to listen and to actually accept suggestions. But again, I think it's case by case. You check their teams to understand what their pain points are. You actually do some tests on your devices. You check feedback from their users, provide like a game plan based on that, depending on their budget and their willingness to change and improve the website.
I love the point there about the training, right? And I think you hit it on the head. Is usually you'll have like the owner is reaching out to get a developer, or it's somebody in IT. You're right; they need to fix the technical issue, but the technical issue is possibly coming from the non-technical user who just doesn't know how to use WordPress very well. And so offering that training, and as a site owner realizing, yes, WordPress is very easy to use, but it's not the easiest thing necessarily. It is still technology. There are ins and outs, and there's a lot of best practices that just a little bit of training can really go a long way. To kind of close out this section of it, Edith, I'd love to hear your thoughts when it comes to WooCommerce. It's really easy to get a WooCommerce website set up and going for a non-technical person. And what I see a lot of the times is suddenly people are just adding plugins. Elson kind of just hinted at this. They add plugins for just one little thing here and there that maybe they need to do like just a custom plugin or something like that. What's kind of your approach and your advice when it comes to WooCommerce websites for when it's time to engage a professional who really fully understands how this stuff works?
Well, obviously I would like to get them engaged at the build phase, because like Elson says, performance begins, it's kind of like what you put in place. It's the foundation you put in place when you build the site. It's costly and difficult to undo errors later. So it starts off with choosing a theme that is both performant and WooCommerce friendly. If you go with a theme that's maybe easy to use for you, but which is a bit bloated, a bit on the slow side, doesn't have the queries optimized, it's going to be really, really hard to turn that ship around later on. So whilst starting up on your own, yeah, I get it, you may need to do it, but it also, money you don't pay when you build the site is money you will have to pay later in performance. That's kind of what I'm saying. And yes, with WooCommerce, I regularly see sites with 50, 70, 80, 90 plugins. That's just how it is in the WooCommerce world. There are a lot of extensions. And I think it's important to say that a plugin at the end of it is just code. Well-written code is a good thing. It gives you more functionality. it gives you a great site and, it adds to your site. Where the problem is badly written code that drags your site down, code that doesn't perform well. So you could have 49 great plugins and one bad apple, and that may need to be addressed. Yeah, with WooCommerce, I don't have an upper limit of plugins because, shops just need the functionality they need. And if they have 50 really well-written plugins, I'm not going to tell them to run their business differently. But it does need in-depth review. And the thing to say is when it comes to the performance reviews, no two sites are alike. I haven't got do this and you will be fine approach. Every site really has to be looked at individually because the pain points will be at different levels, at different points in the shop. So yeah, it's a very individual game, but if you can have somebody involved from the start, obviously it's a nice, good thing to have.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for your time. This has been incredibly enlightening. Your perspectives are amazing. I want to do a quick kind of go around for, how people should reach out to you, where you're at on the internet, if they have questions or want to connect. And I'll go ahead and start with Elson. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, you can look for Elson Codeable on Google and you will find my profile, or you can just go and create a new task and find me as a preferred developer in the list, or just find me somewhere else and I'll find a way to get you onboarded and posting your project on a platform.
Wonderful. All right. And Tome, how should people reach out and get in touch with you?
Likewise, pretty much the same. Like Tome Codeable, I think I'm the only one still. That's great. You can find me there, Tome Pajkovski, but yeah.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. And then finally, Edith, the best for last.
Game. Edith, I think I'm the only Edith at Codeable, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you to Codeable, and thank you to all my Codeable experts for joining me and making me look a lot smarter than I probably am. My name is Roger. I'm with Kinsta. You can find me at kinsta.com or go onto LinkedIn and look me up. I do post there, maybe too much, as some would say. But this has been great. If people have any questions about managing their plugins, please do reach out. And thank you all for joining me.
Thank you, Roger. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.